The term scrimmage yards in American football means yards gained by rushing and receiving plays combined. Some of the best players can do both, which results in totals out of this world. In just the top 5, you have LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the greatest running backs of the 2000s and a Hall of Famer.
Here's Tomlinson, big burst, still on his feet.
Sometimes it looks unstoppable.
Tiki Barber, the greatest running back in New York Giants history. CMC, when healthy, is one of, if not the best back in the league, and he can absolutely do it all. When he hangs it up, he will have a case to make the Hall of Fame himself. And you have Marshall Faulk, who is widely believed to be the greatest receiving running back in NFL history, and is a top 5 back in general, all time. Then, alone at the top, ahead of the 4 previously mentioned names, you have Chris Johnson.
Trying to bounce it outside. Down the line. Uh-oh. See you later. Handoff. Johnson again. Touchdown. Chris Johnson. There it is. He's got sprinter speed, and Johnson is gone.
With a total of 2,509 scrimmage yards, Johnson holds the record of the most combined rushing and receiving yards in the history of the league. That included his extremely rare 2,000-yard rushing feat. Yet he is nowhere near as mentioned as the guys below him. Was he just his 2,000-yard season, or does 2009 actually overshadow how good he was overall? During Johnson's time in the league, I was actually just a teenager, so I never really thought much of it in the sense of, yeah, he had his 2,000-yard season, but after that, I really didn't know much. I almost thought that he fell off almost immediately after that. But in doing my research, I realized that just wasn't the case. I gotta work on my stuttering there. Johnson's NFL career began after a decent senior year at East Carolina. But what truly would boost his stock was when he broke the 40-yard dash record when he ran a 4.24 time, a record that stood until 2017. You'd expect nothing less from the high school track star that at one point in 2004 was the 24th fastest person in the entire nation. Johnson's stock went from late second round, early third round to now first round projections. This would land him in Tennessee with the 24th overall pick in 2008. It's in 2008 that Johnson was placed in a tandem with the bruising Lendell White, and the smash and dash duo would help the Titans to a 13-3 record and made Kerry Collins look like Tom Brady. Tennessee's offense was their run game, as White and Johnson would combine for nearly 2,000 yards and 24 rushing touchdowns. What made Johnson special immediately, though, was his ability to be a pass catcher, and that's an attribute we haven't really discussed yet. In his rookie year alone, Johnson would catch 43 passes for another 260 yards and a touchdown. So, in total, the first round pick had 1,488 scrimmage yards and 10 total touchdowns that would earn him a Pro Bowl nod, and he would finish second in Rookie of the Year voting behind only Matt Ryan. In the playoffs, Johnson would continue to contribute, adding 70 yards on the ground and a touchdown, but the Titans would be one and done in the divisional against the Ravens, 13-10. All in all, even though they didn't make noise in the playoffs, it was more than a solid enough season for not only Johnson, but the Titans in general. 2009, though, was a whole nother story. In just his second year, Johnson would have his historic 2,000-yard campaign, 2,006 rush yards to be exact, and 14 rushing touchdowns to go along with it. And as I mentioned before, Johnson was more than a runner. He also was a receiver, totaling 50 catches for another 500 yards and 2 more receiving touchdowns. Some of his biggest games included the 224 rush yard, 2 touchdown performance against the Jaguars in week 8. Against the Bills in week 10, he would not only total 132 yards on the ground with 2 touchdowns, but he would also catch 9 passes for another 100 yards in a 41-17 victory. But his best game might have been in week 2, where he ran for 197 yards, 3 shy of 200 on the ground, and caught another 9 passes for 87 yards. In total, Johnson had 208 84 scrimmage yards and 3 total touchdowns in a losing effort. Now that's a pretty good segue into my next point. Johnson was one of 9 guys to ever hit 2,000 yards as of my recording in 2025. Yes, I believe that he had the best 2,000 yard season of all 9 players. Let me explain. Out of the 9, by far and away, Johnson was the best pass catcher in their respective seasons. He had a total of 50 catches, with the closest to matching him being Adrian Peterson with 40 during his season. Johnson's receiving yards were a total of 503, which is made that much more impressive when you realize the closest among the 9 to hitting this number was Barry Sanders with only 305, nearly 200 yards less than CJ2K. And if that still wasn't enough to show you just how dominant of a season Johnson actually had, then let me compare him to what every other receiving running back did in 2009. Johnson's 50 receptions ranked him 8th among running backs, and for the record, had he had just 4 more catches, he'd rank 4th to show you how close it actually was. His 503 yards, it was good for 2nd among running backs behind only Ray Rice. In short, Chris Johnson was the offense, yet this season is also marred by the team's lackluster success. This is the season the Titans would start off 0-6 and featured that 59-0 blowout to the New England Patriots, with Kerry Collins being the worst quarterback in the NFL before being relieved by Vince Young, who was average at best, and you have all the ingredients to argue that Johnson might have had the greatest season out of the 9 when you also consider the lack of talent around him. But my theory is that he doesn't get enough recognition due to Tennessee's underwhelming season. It's only Chris and OJ Simpson who would fail to reach the playoffs after having this amazing season. While it felt like a waste since he didn't make the playoffs, the hope was that they could build on not only this amazing year, but also the fact that the team went 8-2 in their final 10 games. In summary, Chris Johnson's MVP caliber season resulted in his 2nd straight Pro Bowl nod, his first ever first team All-Pro honors, and was named Offensive Player of the Year. Yet, somehow, didn't even get a vote for MVP. I don't know about this one, man. Who do you guys think should have won? Anyway, I've been too fixated on 2009. This video is about how good Johnson was for his career in the NFL. So let's go ahead and move on. When the now CJ2K was with the Titans, he was always a huge contributor. While he never reached the heights of 2009, he would still produce at a high level. In 2010, he would rush for 1,364 yards and score 11 times on the ground, while tacking on another 44 receptions, 245 receiving yards, and another score. Again, he isn't mentioned since the Titans failed to capitalize on their strong end to 2009 by having an even worse record at 6-10 this year. Another great year by the running back, wasted. But he did earn his 3rd straight Pro Bowl nod, so there is that. Between the 2008 and 2010 season, so that's 3 seasons in total, Johnson actually led the league when you combine everyone's rushing yards in those 3 seasons. He'd be 150 yards ahead of the next guy in Adrian Peterson, so in short, Johnson was due for a huge payday. Tennessee made him the highest paid running back, signing their man to a 4-year, $53 million deal. And what follows next is still a good season, but his production would begin to decrease. He was still a top tier receiving running back, nabbing 57 catches for 418 yards, but he'd have the lowest rushing yards and lowest rushing touchdown totals with just 1,047 rushing yards and just 4 rushing touchdowns. The newly paid running back would voice his frustration with the team's new offensive coordinator, who would opt for a run and shoot offense instead of trying to establish the ground game. Even though the Titans finally had a winning record at 9-7, their superstar running back felt like he was not involved enough in the offense. In 2012, Johnson would get better in the ground game, but his production as a pass catcher would dip significantly. For what it's worth, while he hadn't made a Pro Bowl since 2010, his production was still, in my opinion, at a Pro Bowl level. But the running back felt like he should have been involved even more. And you know what? Fair point to him. His 2,000-yard season saw him get 358 carries, while 2011 and beyond saw him get nearly 100 less carries comparatively. 2013 was more of the same. A sub 300 carry season that saw him, while still rush for over 1,000 yards, had his lowest yards per carry average with just 3.9, but would remain a more than solid option out of the backfield. Over the course of 3 seasons after signing his contract, Johnson just had a steady decline in his play due to the team simply using him less and the fact that the back was approaching 30. When you take into account the O-line's decline in play as well, it makes perfect sense as to why Johnson, a guy who relied heavily on his home run capability, could never come close to replicating his 2009 season. With his decline in production, the team's lack of success overall, and Johnson vocalizing his frustration often, the Titans would opt to release their former first-round pick after 2013. In his 6 seasons with Tennessee, CJ2K was one of the best running backs in the league. Between those seasons, he would total 7,965 rush yards, which was only second to Adrian Peterson in that span. He would also rank in the top 10 in terms of receptions and receiving yards among running backs, and would rank 5th among running backs in total touchdowns. Maybe it was for the best that Johnson would go on to look for his new home. He could go to a team that was ready to win if he so chose, and maybe, just maybe, he could get back to his elite status. So, in 2014, Johnson would find himself playing for the Jets.
What?
Well, I guess, in his favor, they were a run-heavy team, and he could run in a tandem with Chris Ivory, so, yeah, it did seem like a fit on paper. But you know how there are just some teams where once an elite player goes there, it's just kind of over for them? One of those teams are the New York Jets, and here's where Johnson's career truly began to unravel. 2014 was by far the worst season of his career. He had career lows in carries, rush yards, rushing touchdowns, receptions, receiving yards. At just 29 years old, he simply was not the explosive runner he once was. The few times a hole would open, he just could not take advantage. The Jets would even decline bringing him back for a second year, and once again, the man now 5 seasons removed from his incredible record-breaking year was a free agent. Unfortunately, things would only go from bad to worse, as in the early mornings of March 8th, 2015, Chris Johnson would be involved in a drive-by shooting that would result in the running back being shot in the shoulder, as well as the driver of the vehicle succumbing to gunshot injuries. Chris was left hospitalized but in stable condition and would be later released from the hospital. He'd even go on to say in the I Am Athlete podcast that 3 weeks after the incident, he would begin to deal with nerve issues in his right arm. He would have to go through 6 weeks of bed rest, which resulted in him losing about 25 pounds during recovery. It's safe to say Johnson's career and honestly his personal life were at an all-time low. Yet despite the circumstances that life gave him, Johnson would recover from his injury and begin to train to get back into football shape. In the summer of 2015, he would go on to sign with the Arizona Cardinals. And this could have been the best case scenario for the former first-round pick. After a slow first 2 weeks, he would rush for over 100 yards in 4 of his next 6 games, but would begin to slip in the second half of the season before a fractured tibia caused him to miss the final regular season games and 2 playoff games. A terrible injury that signaled the end may be near, just as he was beginning to shine for the first time in a long time. The Cardinals would opt to bring him back in 2017, but it was in this season that he would play in a grand total of 4 games, topping 50 yards just once before a groin injury would sideline him for the rest of the campaign. In 2017, he would only return to serve as a backup option, given the emergence of Arizona's newest star in David Johnson, and even had one final chance to prove himself when David would go down in week 1. But the explosiveness was all but extinguished by this point, when in the next 4 games, he would average just 2.5 yards per carry. The guy who at one point averaged 5.6 per carry was now averaging less than half of that. After another miserable game in week 5 where Chris would run for just 21 yards on 9 carries, the team would opt to trade for a past his prime Adrian Peterson, and the Cardinals would cut the former first-round pick of the Titans on the same exact day. Chris Johnson would not play another down in the league and would officially retire in 2018 at just 33 years old. While Johnson is mostly known for the season that gave him the nickname CJ2K, it's due to 2009 that his career in my eyes is a bit underrated. Yes, he only made the Pro Bowl in his first 3 seasons, but during that stretch was either the second best or even the best, depending on who you talk to. If you throw in his entire 6-season run with the Titans, he never rushed for less than 1,000 yards at any point. For Johnson's career totals though, he would rush for 9,651 yards, which has him ranked 36th all time, and scored 55 rushing touchdowns, which has him tied with Jalen Hurts in the career rankings. Another little fun fact for you there. But when you add receiving, he would total 307 catches for another 2,255 yards and another 9 receiving touchdowns, which in total would give him 11,906 scrimmage yards, which is actually more than Deshaun Jackson, Chad Ochocinco, and Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson. You also can't ever take away his forever immortalized 2,000-yard season, which means he will always be brought up among some truly great names in the league. Now that we've covered his career, if I had to give the career of Chris Johnson, CJ2K, a grade, I think without his 2,000-yard season, he'd be a B-, but with it, he's a B+. But what do you guys think? What grade would you give the career of Chris Johnson? Be sure to thumbs up this video if you've made it this far. We're on the road to 5,000 subs. Thank you guys so much. Every like, every subscribe, every time you guys hear this part of the video, it means the world to me. It means that you guys stuck around to the end of the video. So thank you guys so much. If there's a guy you guys want me to cover in another future video, let me know in the comments down below as well. And I'll see you next time.